My name is Max Rudman. I'd like to welcome you to a Memorial Day program organized by Young Israel Shomrai Emunah's Social Committee. Now, we've all heard the classic stereotype of the careers that a Jewish mother wants for her kids. Topping them was doctor, lawyer, accountant. The list would be longer now, and we include high-tech, engineers, scientists. Serving in the military will probably not be one of the top 10. That's because stereotypes linger. From the beginning of Jewish life in America, there's been a strong tradition, however, of military service. In United States history, the patriotism and valor of more than 20 Jews have been recognized with the Medal of Honor. Nevertheless, it is still relatively rare in our community to meet fellow Jews that have decided to serve. On Memorial Day, it is fitting to recognize the sacrifice that the fellow citizens make in joining the military, sometimes making the ultimate sacrifice. Several of our panel members have served overseas, from Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan. For some, their service has brought them in actual war theaters. We have asked retired and active service members from diverse backgrounds to reflect on what led them to join, what their experiences have taught them, and where applicable, how they've grown in their faith. Scott Schlesinger, a longtime resident of Silver Spring and Camp Mill, and an active veteran, will be wearing two hats, sharing his own experience and introducing his fellow panel members. After the panelists have spoken, he will also review and direct questions to them. He will mute everybody so you can focus on their presentation and remarks. Please send your questions, if you have any, through the chat feature of the Zoom program, and we welcome all your questions after the presentations. This program is being recorded. Thank you again for joining us. There's a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to learning through your questions and through the panel's remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it, Max. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our panel for today. But as Max pointed out, today is Memorial Day. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention or make a few comments about Memorial Day. People see me on the street or see veterans on the street all the time, and the common refrain is thank you for your service. And it is appreciated, but along with service comes sacrifice. And we've all made sacrifices while being in the military. However, some people have made the ultimate sacrifice. And it sounds trite, I hear it all the time, that ultimate sacrifice. But when you think about it, it is something that is very deep and is very, very meaningful. The ultimate sacrifice, they gave their life for this country. They not only sacrificed, their families sacrificed, their wives, their husbands, their brothers, their sisters, their children, all sacrificed for this country and for us. And so this is a day that we set aside to remember them, not strictly with barbecues or to recognize veterans who are currently serving, but to realize the people who have given us this opportunity and have made that sacrifice. So keep that in mind as we go forward. But you know, all the people who will be talking today are ready to make that sacrifice for their country. We're going to start out with talking to Captain Matthew Burke, who has spent 34 years in service of his country. He started in 1986 and he retired recently in 2020. He has been to a host of different assignments. He started out in the United States Navy, and then he moved on to the United States Army. He finished his career by working for the United States Health Services. He's been to places like San Diego, Moffett Field. He was on the USS Carl Vinson. He went to Camp San Luis Obispo in California. He's also at the San Francisco Armory in California, Sam Houston in Texas. He's been to Oakland, California, and also to Fort McPherson in Georgia. He's got a wealth of experience, and we're very pleased that he will be sharing that with us today. So please welcome Captain Matt Weinberg.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share my slides and start out. And you can all see my slides, I presume. Great. So as as Scott was saying, that my Jewish experience, my military experience, is intertwined. There's a lot of intersectionality between those. So I started off in the U.S. Navy in 1986, and just to give you a little bit of information right before that, I was actually I had gone to college for a couple years, decided I wanted to leave college, and then went to Israel and lived in Israel for about a year and a half, and worked on a kibbutz, worked on a moshav, lived in Jerusalem for a little bit, and really sort of became a lot more stronger about myself being a Jew. At that same time, I was wanting to basically serve. And one time I thought I was going to serve in the Israeli military, but decided to come back to the United States. And so I came back and I enlisted into the US Navy. That was sort of phase one of my military experience. And then I went to the Army after that, from 1997 to 2009. And from 2009 to 2020, it was the US Public Health Service. And you can see what I've shown you is the insignias of each of those services right there. Okay. There I am, sailor, young sailor in the Navy. Black and white photo. That's 1986. I had just completed boot camp. I went to hospital corpsman school, and I was ready to take on those experiences as a Navy medic, as a hospital corpsman medic. So some of the experiences I want to also talk about is my growth, as a Jew growing. So obviously when I was in Israel, I identified very strongly as a Jew, but also I had this sort of Israeli type Jewish influence that I had acquired when I was in Israel as well. So when I first the Navy, I had this experience of being as a Jew, but also as being sort of had this Israeli experience. What had happened after that was I basically decided I would go and go up to Northern California to Moffett Field, and I was assigned up there to our branch clinic up there. There I actually became stronger in my Jewish identity. I got accepted to a program that they allowed me to go to school, back to school. So I went back to school and finished, while I was active duty, I went back to school, finished up my college degree. And during that school experience, I joined Hillel and the Jewish Student Union, and actually gave a lot of presentations at the university, and also became stronger in my Jewish identity as well. From there, I had a college degree, but I actually had to sign a contract. And that contract I had to sign had to put me for about 6 more years in the military, in the Navy, from the date that I started that school to 6 years after that. So I got the notification that said, hey, you are gonna need to go to sea duty. And so at that time, one of the sort of the most strongest experiences of my life, but one of the hardest experiences, one of the challenges of it was being on a sea duty. And during that time, from 1993 to 1997, I served on the USS Carl Vinson. This is a picture of us, of the medical crew. There was over 5,600 sailors. At that time, they were all males. They've now become about 30% female on carriers now, but they were all males. During that time, I served about almost 4 years. Did two tours in the Persian Gulf. Was in the Persian Gulf, the war in the 90s, and by that time I was becoming stronger with my Jewish identity, and became a Jewish lay leader. I wanted to have Jewish services. We didn't have a rabbi on the ship. I reached out to rabbi communities in the, we were actually out of Alameda. So I had reached out to rabbis, and they supported me. They wrote a letter to support me being a Jewish leader. So I had that support from rabbis. There were chaplains on board the ship. And those chaplains saw the letter. They said, that's all, that's what we need. We need certification. We need, and, we need to know. So they acknowledged, they put me, and they assigned me as a Jewish lay leader. So from the time basically just around 1993 to the end of 1996, I was the Jewish lay leader by that ship. I had a friend on that ship, Lewis Myers. Remember Lewis? I don't keep in contact, but Lewis Myers grew up conservative. I grew up Reform. So I'm very loosey-goosey Jew. But I grew up and decided that that I needed someone who was strong in the prayer, strong in that area, and he was very strong in that area. And he helped. He and I, between the two of us, between him kind of advising me on the more of the liturgy side and the prayer side, helped me, and we conducted Yom Kippur services, Pesach services. As many services probably, and really one of the most important things was Shabbat. When we're out at sea, just doing a Shabbat Friday night, that was so important for me to do that those Friday. It gave strength to me. It was very stressful at that time. We were at war in the Persian Gulf War, and it was very stressful at time. And so having that Jewish identity and having other people come to our services was really, really important for me. Then in 1997, I said, I've got my degree. I need to leave, and I did not want to become a line officer in the Navy, so I decided to join the Army. So I joined the Army in and then went to Army OCS, Officer Candidate School, and went to Officer Basic School, went to all the schools. I became a reservist, but I became an officer in the Army. And during that time, I actually went from 1997 to 2009. I was a reservist, so it was kind of a different period. I got married. I had a number of life events. A lot of things happened, but I left the Army as an 03. During that time in my life, I was working for Centers for Disease Control in California, and then I got assigned a position in Atlanta, Georgia. And then so I went to, as Scott said, was assigned to Fort McPherson in Atlanta. So I went to Atlanta, Georgia during that time. During that time also, I was mobilized by the Army for 9/11. So I was mobilized during that time as well. So there's quite a few things that occurred during that time. A lot of it was growth, becoming stronger as a Jew, identifying, myself, and also what am I doing in my career, my professional career as well. In 2009, I decided, okay, I'm going to leave the Army. I had got my master's degree, and I decided I'm going to go and join the public health service. And so in Atlanta, Georgia, I joined the public health service. It was a year-long package that you have to submit, and I got accepted into that program, and then was assigned to CD, Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. Right after that, I spent from 2011 to 2016, I was assigned to Yosemite National Park as their public health officer and epidemiologist. During that time, it was a remote community, but we were able to practice as much as we can. We actually we set up Pesach services, and we set up with the community out there. We set up Hanukkah services as much as we can with the community. And then in 2015, I was sent to Liberia for the Ebola response. And during that time for the Ebola response in 2015, I took on not really a formal, but an informal Jewish lay leader experience. It was during Passover time and Pesach. And as the Christians were celebrating their Easter, I was celebrating Passover. And every Friday night while I was out there in Liberia, just south of Monrovia, we would have Jewish Shabbat services, and we also did a Pesach service, which, we did what we could. We had some things shipped out to us from there. So that was an incredible experience being in Liberia and being strong with my Jewish identity. And during these times, other people would come to, I'm curious what your services are and things like that. And then at the end of came back in 2016. From 2017 to 2020, I went to DC, Washington, DC, and Maryland. That's what I met Sheldon and some others. And I joined the JWV. First time I joined Jewish War Veterans. I mean, I'd never even known existed. I joined the Jewish War Veterans. And so I met Scott and met some others, and actually joined the Aisha Torah Synagogue, which I'm still a member. And so I became even stronger with my Jewish identity and Jewish experiences. And I think it was just a maturing effect of where I was. And then 2020, I retired. So it's a long history. As you know, 34 years of that, a lot of different experiences from when I was a little kid to, and this is my experience of being in the public health service. And there's more public health service. And then finally, that's me retiring, but basically almost retiring. That's me in my final garb, retiring in the U.S. Public Health Service. But it's been a it's been a lot of growth and a lot of experiences. And as I pass the baton over to our next speaker, I think that's what is with us. Oh, I grew as a uniformed service military member, but I also grew as a Jew too. Thank you very much. And I will pass the baton to the next person.
I got to remember to take myself off of mute as well. So thank you very much, Captain Weinberg. We appreciate your service and we appreciate your joining us here this evening. Let me go on. We're going to be moving on now to somebody that we know here very well in our community, and that's Captain Stephen Deutsch. He was the president of our shul at one time. And I still call him Mr. President, but I don't usually rise to the occasion as much as I used to. He is an officer in the Medical Corps of the United States Navy. He is a captain, which, by the way, there are two different types of captains. In the Navy, that is an 06, that is an eagle on the shoulder. Whereas if you were a captain in the Army, the Air Force, Space, you're going to have two bars, which would make you an 04. But this is an 06. He's a full bird colonel captain in the Navy. He's also a professor in the United States Uniformed Services University, Health Services. He's been to places around the country and around the world. He was at Portsmouth. He's far off lands like Bethesda, and he was also in Landstuhl, Germany. He's here with us today. Actually, I think he's out of town, but he's joining us here today. And that's Stephen Deutsch, Captain Stephen Deutsch. I appreciate your being here, and with that, I will add you to the spotlight, send myself off. And here we go. Hang on a second, sir, and I will get you your. Got to get you on. See, trying to work the technology. You'd think I'd be better at this, but let's see. Oh, there we go. Ask to unmute. There we go.
Thank you so much. I returned from Boca Raton just to be here for this program. Thank you for allowing me to share some personal thoughts about Memorial Day. Today, I want to speak about the lessons I learned throughout my military training that, together with love of country, serve to keep our citizens safe and protect the freedoms that we all enjoy. These freedoms can never be taken for granted and must always be defended. I will share a little of my own personal story to highlight the fact that each of us can play very important roles to keep our country safe, even if only a very few of us will ever be asked to participate in combat. The Navy taught me that keeping even a single ship at sea in dangerous waters with a full complement of highly trained, brave men and women on board requires even greater numbers of men and women stationed on land, working to keep that single ship afloat and battle ready. My story started in 1991, 10 years before 9/11, when Iraq invaded its neighboring country, Kuwait. Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, personified hatred and evil and spoke publicly about his intention to destroy Israel. During this conflict, Iraq fired 42 Scud missiles into Israel. Out of deference to America, Israel restrained herself and did not respond militarily, even though Israel was worried about the possibility that Iraqi Scud missiles would deliver chemical weapons. At that time, Men, women, and children in Israel wore gas masks and lived in sealed rooms whenever sirens sounded, warning of a missile attack. I thought about our American heroes deployed thousands of miles from home, entering into a battle against this evil that threatened America and Israel. I thought about my father, a talented musician who served our country in the Navy's National Orchestra, boosting the morale of the troops. I thought of my wife's father, who served aboard ship in combat in the Pacific Ocean during World War II. Like them, I felt a sense of pride in being an American and wished to support our troops going into harm's way. The process of joining was more complicated than I initially imagined, as I was older than most other recruits and needed to get special permission to join over the age of 40. The Navy carefully reviewed and verified my education and medical credentials, as well as confirming that I met the physical fitness standards for service. As the President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the White House approved my entry into what is known as the Medical Corps, where I could serve as a doctor. The first step was to travel to Florida for officers training school at Naval Air Station Pensacola, built in 1913 and home to the military's most elite Navy pilots, known as the Blue Angels. This is when I learned the startling fact that the U.S. Navy has more airplanes than the U.S. Air Force. During officers training school, we learned about the history of our military, participated in mandatory physical readiness training, and learned how to properly wear the required Navy uniforms. We were inspected by the base commanders to make sure our shoes and brass insignias were shined, hair was cut properly, uniforms were cleaned and pressed, and we stood erect at attention during inspection. We were taught to shoot a pistol, and I earned a qualifying ribbon as a sharpshooter for accurately shooting a pistol at a distant paper target. Even though I would work as a doctor, a U.S. Marine captain and his drill sergeant taught us to march in formation. Before leaving officers training school, we took an oath promising to defend the Constitution of the United States and embrace the Navy and Marine Corps' core values of honor, courage, and commitment. When I was promoted up the ranks to commander and captain, my appointments were made by the President of the United States with the approval and consent of the Senate. As a Navy doctor, I treated active duty members, retirees, and their families from all branches of our military, exposing me to sailors as well as soldiers, U.S. Marines, U.S. Air Force pilots, Coast Guardsmen, and members of the U.S. Public Health Service. This taught me about the different jobs in all branches of the military and uniformed services and how important each of these specialized jobs is to the defense of our country. I completed my military service in the hospital, caring for patients, and also teaching groups of future military doctors at the military medical school. Because I was a Sabbath observer, with the rare exceptions of national emergencies and mandatory drill weekends, I was excused from drilling on Shabbos out of respect for my religious beliefs. After 9/11, the most deadly attack on the continental United States from a foreign enemy in the history of America, mandatory training focused on topics related to anti-terrorism. This included courses on cybersecurity, human trafficking, and preparing for nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons attack. All of which continue to be taken seriously. Military members were trained to be vigilant and aware of their surroundings, especially when deployed to a foreign country. When leaving their military bases, they dress in civilian clothes so as not to become targets for terrorists. They are taught to protect their offices from leaks of classified information that can be used by terrorists. This training includes recognizing the dangers of what is called social engineering, which involves foreign agents acting friendly to obtain top secret information. In 2003, during Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, I was mobilized and assigned to full-time active duty service at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, where I served as the consultation psychiatrist for all military personnel returning from combat in Iraq and Afghanistan with very serious wounds and other medical problems. We had a commitment as well to help their families through counseling and support. Caring for injured warriors was traumatic for many of our full-time hospital workers, and I was asked to start group sessions to help them cope with the daily repeated trauma of caring for young men injured in combat. The reservists were critical to the operation of the Bethesda Navy Medical Center because a large number of the active duty doctors, nurses, corpsmen, and other specialized hospital workers were sent to the USS Comfort, a large floating hospital ship complete with operating rooms and critical care units that was sent to the Persian Gulf and the Middle East. The USS Comfort is not a military warship and is protected from attack under the Geneva Convention. However, the ship was in dangerous waters and remained at risk from attack by terrorists. The men and women aboard the USS Comfort were exposed to environmental pollutants as Iraq set fire to its oil fields and the entire region was engulfed in unhealthy fumes. In December 2008, I received a cell phone call from a Navy officer informing me that I was mobilized for a second time. Within a week or so, a big duffel bag filled with boots, 3 sets of camouflaged work uniforms, belts, a cap, and socks arrived at my home. My orders were to report to Naval Station Norfolk, the largest naval base on the East Coast, for a pre-deployment medical exam and updated vaccinations. I was being sent to the Army's regional hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. This military hospital is the largest military hospital outside of the United States. I returned home from Norfolk and was given a date to fly in a commercial airline to Frankfurt, Germany. Upon landing in Frankfurt, I was to go to the USO office in the airport where I would be met by a van that would drive me to the hospital. I didn't know where I was going, who I was meeting, and did not have a clue as to how to put on this Army uniform. Nonetheless, everything worked out well. I was met, driven to the Army post, shown how to put on the uniform, and started one of the most memorable experiences of my life. Almost every day for 4 months, I would wake up to a dark, overcast sky, leave the barracks in freezing cold weather, and walk to the hospital. Directly from battle, injured servicemen were evacuated on flying hospitals to the Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. From there, ambulance brought the wounded to the Landstuhl Regional Army Medical Center, where the doctors immediately provided medical care. During this time, planes with large numbers of wounded service members landed 3 or more times per week. The doctors determined whether patients needed to be stabilized and sent to military hospitals in the U.S. or sent for rehabilitation close to their homes. Those soldiers who could recover quickly returned to their combat units. Others were recommended for medical separation from military service. Treating combat-related physical injuries in our patients was made more difficult by the emotional and cognitive difficulties they had as a result of exposure to the horrors of war. Terrorists during the Iraqi war planted devices called IEDs on busy roads, which were triggered to explode when run over by a vehicle or unknowingly stepped on. Survivors of attacks suffered stress-related complications, which made our heroes susceptible to drug and alcohol abuse. 13 years after 9/11, because of multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, a large number of medical evaluations had to be completed. Special military assignments, which were often dangerous and related to U.S. security and intelligence, required that high-level officers and enlisted personnel pass medical and psychiatric screenings. As a result, I was ordered to stay on base for many weekends to screen these service members for their assignments. Although I had to awaken very early on Shabbos to daven and read the Parsha, this inconvenience turned out to be surprisingly rewarding and meaningful. I screened and evaluated enlisted personnel and officers, including very senior officers with very high security clearances. Because I was privileged to hear what's called highly sensitive information, I was required to have a security clearance during the entire period of my service. In summary, the military offers many opportunities for those with a patriotic sense of duty and a desire for performing selfless service. I always tell people who ask me about my military service that I was never in harm's way, but I had the privilege of taking care of so many heroes that were. There are so many critical jobs in the military, most of which have little to do directly with combat, but all of which are important. For example, the cooks are extremely important. Learning how to feed and meet the nutritional needs of thousands of military members. Personnel trained in construction, electrical engineering, and airplane maintenance are crucial to our mission. Maintenance of latrines and removal of human waste in the field is important to prevent spread of infection or contamination of life-saving water supplies. Moreover, it is important to leave no trails or telltale signs of our troop movements in dangerous places. All branches actively seek out service members who are deserving of special recognition, which include performance of jobs and assignments in a manner that is excellent. Many of you have seen ribbons and medals worn on the uniforms of military service members across all branches. These ribbons and the medals that may be associated with them are awarded in recognition of special achievement and are often given during special awards ceremonies. The personal capstones of my 20-year-long career in the U.S. Navy Reserve was being honored with promotion to captain, which rank is the equivalent of a colonel in the Army, Air Force, and Marines, and receipt of both the Army Commendation Medal and the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for recognition of exemplary service in the highest traditions of our military services. Please remember that freedom is not free. Please do not forget that it is the veteran, not the preacher, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the veteran, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the veteran, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the veteran, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. Commemorating military members and remembering their service is very much a Jewish tradition. We are quick to show a karas hatov to those who sacrifice and those that have made the ultimate sacrifice for us. In Israel, Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, is preceded by Yom HaShoah V'Gevura, remembrance of those that died so that independence could be won and celebrated. Once again, thank you for this lovely invitation.
Thank you, Captain Deutsch. We appreciate your service, appreciate your being here this evening as well. And you did have a quite a remarkable career, and it was a very rewarding career, I'm sure. Our next speaker is somebody I met a while back, maybe about 4 years ago. We helped me establish the Jewish War Veterans right here in Kemp Mill, and the Jewish War Veterans Post here in Kemp Mill. He's one of the founding members. He entered the military in 1956. So we're talking about 66 years ago. He entered the military, stayed until 1985, 30 years of service, and he has served in a lot of different capacities, starting out as a band member. He was a marching to the tune of his own drummer, I guess. And but now he is he's very active in the Jewish community and in the military. And I would like to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Sheldon Goldberg. Colonel Goldberg.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here among this group and talk to the people that are out there listening. My story starts in high school. It's going to be somewhat different than what you've heard, but I'm sure other people can react to it. I was a fairly good student in high school, went to Cass Technical High School in Detroit, which was the best high school in the city at the time. And that's where I was born and grew up. But my love of music, I was a good clarinetist, and my disdain for my geometry teacher. I was studying to be an aeronautical engineer in high school, or so I thought, until I found out what an aeronautical engineer really does. But that's another story. But anyway, being both in the band, the concert band and the marching band caused me to drop classes. And the result was when it came time to graduate, I was 6 hours short. and I had to stay an extra semester. Now, during that period, I realized that I did not want to be an aeronautical engineer, and some other personal issues cropped up that left me feeling that I needed to get away to find myself and what I wanted out of life. In other words, at least to learn a trade or something. I had always been interested in aviation since I had my first ride in an airplane when I was 4 years old. And so the most obvious answer was to join the Air Force. Now, ironically, music inadvertently changed my life from the day that I arrived at basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. A former high school classmate of mine who had already auditioned for the Air Force Band saw me in the chow line, whispered a few words to me, said he'd take care of me. And 2 or 3 days later, I was the xylophone player in the basic drum and bugle corps. About a month later, let me do some sharing here. That's me back in April 1956. About a month or so later, I returned to the barracks from some light detail to find the barracks empty. And I learned that everyone was at the band barracks auditioning. I never stopped to think what they were auditioning for. So I grabbed my clarinet anyway and ran there. And I swear I played the best that I'd ever played in my life and found that I had passed the audition, but I never bothered to ask what for. So upon graduation from basic, I went to get my expected assignment as an airborne radio operator. This was the job for which I had qualified in all the tests I had taken, only to find out that as a result of that audition, I had become a bypass specialist and was assigned to the band field. And so when I arrived at my first assignment, which was the Strategic Air Command Band at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska, I introduced myself by asking, how do I get to go overseas? I figured if I'm going to have to do this, I might as well get to see the world. Well, long story short, 6 months later, I was on my way to West Germany and the United States Air Force's band in Europe, probably the second best band next to the Washington band in the Air Force. And that's where my entire life changed again. Yeah, let's see, how do I get this changed? There we go. That you can see me there in the band. And about 6 months after I arrived, I met the woman who would become my wife. I also completed an agreement with my high school vice principal and completed the 6 hours I had missed by correspondence, thereby earning my high school diploma. Now, while in Germany, although I do not remember going to services in basic in Germany, I was able to attend services regularly. We had a great rabbi at Wiesbaden there. And 1 year I was actually asked to sing Kol Nidre during Yom Kippur services. I traveled all over Western Europe with the band, seeing things I never imagined I would see. We had an audience with the Pope, John Paul XXIII. We played for the King and Queen of Denmark and the King and Queen of Norway. I also learned German and became the band's announcer in German as we continued our concerts on. So I wound up, as I said, met the woman I became my wife. I got married. I became a father, and this was nice, but it would not suffice for a career or in which to raise a family. At least that's the way I felt. I was a good clarinetist, but I was not that good. I wanted more, and so I applied for officer candidate school, and I was accepted. Once again, my entire life really changed, and this time for the better. But while I've got to tell you a little anecdote, but while we were at OCS, there were 5 of us Jewish fellows in the class of 102. One of the requirements was that in the first 9 weeks of the 3-month basic or underclass period, we were required to go to services. And being that Sunday was the only day that we had free, and the Jewish services were over on the other side of the base at Lackland and didn't start till about 12 or so, we decided we really didn't want to have our day ruined. So we started to go to Catholic services. And in the services, we would stand when they stood, we would sit when they sat, but we would never kneel. And about 3 or 4 weeks into doing this, a letter came down from headquarters that said basically that if you are going to be going to services not of your faith, then please comply and do everything that everybody else does. Well, we got the message. And from that point on, we started to go to Jewish services across the base, even though it took probably half of our free Sunday, but we went anyway. Let's see. So after OCS, I was commissioned, became an officer and a navigator. That's me as a second lieutenant already with navigator wings. It was mentioned earlier by Captain Deutsch about the difference between captains in the Navy and the other services. And I have to tell you that for a while, there was a couple times I was detailed to Moffett Field to fly with the Navy. They had the C-121 Constellations that would fly passengers into the Pacific. And the first time I got there and it was time to go on a mission, I would call up base operations and tell them this was Captain Goldberg. I needed to ride to base ops. And within minutes, there was a staff car there that whisked me off to base ops. And, you know, that was it. I went on my mission. I came back, had a couple of days off. That was time to fly a second mission. And I would call base ops again and say, this is Captain Goldberg. I need a ride to base ops. And there would be a pregnant pause at the other end of the phone. And the operator, the person at the other end would say, Navy or Air Force? And I said, well, Air Force. Yes, sir. Transport will be there right away. And maybe about a half hour later, a pickup truck came by to get me and take me to base ops. So this is how I found the basic difference between being a captain in the Air Force, being a captain in the Navy. So as a navigator, though, I got to fly a number of aircraft. Some of you probably never seen this airplane, the C-124. This is the Globemaster. I then transitioned into the first all-jet transport, C-141. And while I was at McCord, this was where I was stationed, I was able to earn a bachelor's degree. And that led me to get a scholarship, a graduate scholarship that the Air Force approved. And I wound up at the University of Wisconsin getting a master's degree. The Air Force reward for getting a master's degree was a trip to Southeast Asia. I was told that, you know, navigators cost $100,000 a year to make. Graduate students they can get for $10,000 a year. So I was more valuable going over there. The war, of course, was in full swing. And I wound up as a weapons systems officer flying the backseat of an F-4 in the only night dedicated fighter squadron in the Air Force at the time. While I was there, I was stationed at Ubon Air Base in Thailand, flew most of my missions over the Ho Chi Minh Trail and a couple into North Vietnam. By the time my time was over in Southeast Asia, I had flown somewhat over 200 combat missions and was decorated twice with the Distinguished Flying Cross and the V for Valor and 17 air medals. My next assignment was actually to Cannon Air Force Base, and that's me again, Southeast Asia with an F-4 behind me there. My next assignment was to Cannon Air Force Base, and then later, 18 months later, to RAF Upper Hayford, where I flew the F-111 for the next 4 years. And this was also the first assignment of 3 consecutive tours overseas. Following my tour in Upper Hayford, because of my German language skills, I was assigned as the advisor to the Commandant of the German General Staff College in Hamburg, Germany. This was followed as the Central Region's Air Staff Policy Officer at Headquarters Allied Forces Central Europe in the Netherlands. And finally, I returned after 10 years in Europe to Air University at Maxwell Air Force Base, where I served first on the faculty of Air Command and Staff College, and again on the faculty of the Associate School of the Air War College. There was, while I was in England, there was a fair-sized Jewish community there, and we had sort of a circuit riding rabbi that would come by. And whenever he came by, we had services. We did not have a lay leader, but maybe once a month we would be able to go and have services. But also at that time, my son was bar mitzvah there with that rabbi, so we were able to get at least that much done. And we also had a rabbi in Southeast Asia would come by about once every couple of months. We'd have services, and we even had a religious retreat where we went down to Pattaya Beach for about 7 or 8 days. That was quite interesting. I retired from Maxwell Air Force Base, and you can see me, that was my retirement photo. And I guess I forgot to say that while I was in Southeast Asia, there were 3 fighter squadrons in the wing, and I believe I was the only Jew in those 3 fighter squadrons. So it kind of, how to put it, it made me very conscious of who I was and what I was. And I never hid it. And it was interesting because at one point in Southeast Asia, when the squadron guys were out flying their missions, I was the duty officer. I just had this epiphany, and I wrote up on the scheduling board, what's a nice Jewish boy like me doing in a place like this, killing Buddhists to make the world safe for Christianity. And that was seen by one of the pilots in the squadron who turned out to be an author. And I now consider myself immortalized in print. He wrote an article called Ho Chi Minh on the night mission on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And he talks about the jokey mustachioed fighter pilot. And he quotes what I quote there. And I believe in many respects that my self-knowledge of who I was and who I am today and what I do, that is, I have been 3 times commander, and I'm now adjutant of JWV Post 692 up in Rockville. I've been the newsletter editor of that post for about, 10 years or so. I am the National Executive Committee representative, or will be up until Scott takes over in July, of the Department of Maryland. I also went to school and earned my doctorate. And as soon as I earned my doctorate, I became the docent and historian at the National Museum of American Jewish Military History in Washington, D.C., where I give tours and lectures on American Jews in the military since pre-colonial times. I review books on Jewish themes. So you can see some of the various activities that I've been involved in. I write these book reviews for the Jewish Veteran, which is the quarterly newspaper of the Jewish war veterans. And I helped build a Veterans Memorial in Rockville. As you can see, this is the American Jewish Veterans Memorial. It's on the grounds of the Bender Jewish Community Center, where yesterday we held our 6th annual Memorial Day program that had something like over 50 people show up. It was a very, very interesting and good program. Our keynote speaker yesterday was Rabbi James Michaels, who was the Rabbi Emeritus. He was the rabbi at the Hebrew Home, and gave a very inspirational talk about how Jewish chaplains, how chaplains overall function in the military and what they do and how they do. And he focused it on one of the 4 chaplains, Rabbi Good, of the 4 chaplains who went down on the Dorchester in 1943. Now, throughout all those years and even up to today, I believe that certain Jewish values that I may have unknowingly inherited from my parents and grandparents have guided my life. My quest for knowledge that led me from a high school dropout to a Ph.D. and author. And I plagiarized, I plagiarized from an Army motto in that I tried to be all that I could be. I took pride in my service career and my subsequent career in government, where I did another 16 years. And I'm to some extent a charitable person, not only financially, but also by giving my time, as I mentioned, to the Jewish war veterans, the museum, and anyone who wants to know about history of Jews in the military, and also to several other military veteran service organizations of which I'm a member. So I guess that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So thank you all. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Max, for inviting me. And I hope I provided some information on, again, a Jewish veteran in the military.
Very much, Colonel. We appreciate your being here, and you are truly an inspiration, all the things that you have accomplished, and in a war zone, and protecting our country and our way of life. We really appreciate your being here with us tonight. All right. We have another individual here from our community who is just back from a tour in Hungary. And many of you may already know him, Major Jonathan Goldstein, Yoni Goldstein, who just, like I said, came back from Hungary. And I'm going to brag about him just a little bit. People might not realize the significance of why he was out there, but Major Goldstein was selected as an Olmsted Scholar. And an Olmsted Scholar is a very prestigious award. Only 5 people a year are selected for that award, where you get to go to a school and a language school, learn the language, and get an advanced degree. And he was one of the 5 last year selected by the United States Air Force. And so it was really quite an honor, and it's an honor to have him as a member of Young Israel Shomrai Emunah, and to have him here this evening to talk a little bit about his experience. So without further ado, Major Goldstein.
Thank you, Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'll try and keep this as quick as possible and share my slides. Okay, so I want to first start with a disclaimer, if I can. Just a second here. There we go. So anything that I say, any opinions, stuff like that, that's mine alone, does not represent the U.S. Department of Defense, the Air Force, or the Joint Staff, which is my current assignment. So being that I'm still on active service, I have to get that out of the way. And last but not least, this is unclassified. This is what I'm going to talk about, and you'll see the 3 different symbols on the bottom. The first is in the middle, the new symbol for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We just added a 5th sword for the U.S. Space Force. So we had 4 armed services before: the Army, Air Force, Navy, U.S. Marine Corps, and now the Space Force. And on either side, you have the Air Force logo, and then the Joint Staff J5. So we have numbered directorates within the Joint Staff, and I'm in the Strategy, Plans, and Policy section. Just to explain really quickly where I am today, and then we'll work backwards a little bit. What's the Joint Staff? The Joint Staff is the body of military and civilian personnel who provide the best military advice to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley. And he in turn provides the best military advice he can to the president and the Secretary of Defense. And so we serve the chairman's needs, and that's where I kind of fit in. We call it the salt mines because we're plugging away on all kinds of strategic issues, and that's what we do on a daily basis. Okay, let's continue. I'd like to start with an immense thank you and gratitude to my family, my wife, and my children. This is for all those families who deserve our eternal respect and admiration. Military families often don't get the credit that they are due, because we get to go and serve, and yes, we do put our lives on the line. However, the families have to stay behind and keep the home ship afloat, as it were. It's not easy. In fact, it's very difficult, and there are many times when things are just very, very hard. And especially on one of my deployments, I deployed to combat 4 different times. And on the last one was a 6-month tour. And we were living in Seattle, Washington, and all of my wife's family is on the East Coast. And so being so far removed from home, from help, and we had 3 young children at the time, and I was halfway around the world, it was very difficult. So I just want to say thank you to all those families. And there are probably people in the audience whose parents served, whose siblings have served. Thank you for your sacrifice as well. And today being Memorial Day, I would like to remember a few of my friends who gave the last full measure of devotion. So starting from the upper left-hand corner, Lieutenant Dave Schmitz, who was what we call a Mustang. He was a loadmaster in the C-17, the plane which I flew for 7 years. And he became an officer, went to pilot training, excelled, became an F-16 pilot, and unfortunately, almost 2 years ago, made the ultimate sacrifice. Following that, Stephen Del Bagno, another fighter pilot, friend of mine, who was Thunderbird number 4, unfortunately on a training sortie, he crashed and lost his life. And then Will Du Bois on the upper right, he was one of my trainers. He actually trained me as an officer. And he lost his life in a combat mission several years ago. And then the 2 together on the bottom left are Tori Pinckney and Trip Zanitas, 2 good friends of mine from pilot training. And you'll see their call sign and the class patch. Their class was right ahead of mine at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma in 2009, 2010. And we miss them to this day. And the last picture of the caskets, that was my 2nd combat mission in Afghanistan, where we were recut midair and said, hey, fly to this base. And after that, instead of continuing to your next station, you're going straight back to Ramstein, get some more gas. We're extending your duty day, and you're going straight to Dover Air Force Base to bring these heroes home. And so we want to remember these people, these heroes, and their sacrifice. Okay, we're going to change gears now. I'll tell you a little bit of my story just really quickly, because I know we're short on time. So I went to college in Baltimore. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, went to the East Coast for college, graduated in 2008, got married, commissioned as an officer in the Air Force through Air Force ROTC, which is fantastic because they gave a really good scholarship to attend university. And then we moved to Oklahoma in 2008, went to pilot training. I got to fly the DA-20, the T-6, and the T-1. You'll see a few pictures later on. And was selected to fly the C-17 Globemaster III. So Colonel Goldberg, just a quick shout out to you. You flew the C-124 Globemaster II, nicknamed Old Shaky. And we actually served at the same base, I want to say something like 50 years apart. So you were at McCord, I was at McCord, the same wing, same unit throughout the years. And so it's very cool. And the same thing also happened to me at Naval Air Station Rota when I called in and said, this is Captain Goldstein. We'll be landing in about an hour and a half. And they rolled out the red carpet, brought distinguished visitor transport, and realized this Air Force captain in a greasy flight suit stepping out of an airplane with railroad tracks instead of chickens on his shoulder. And then the next day they sent an unair-conditioned school bus to pick us up and bring us back to the plane as retribution. So it's kind of funny. Anyway, some religious opportunities and challenges in military life, and there are many. The first, you have to eat every day, right? Keeping kosher. How do you keep kosher in the military? I grew up religious and I didn't want to give that up, and keeping kosher was an extremely, and is an extremely important facet of my life. And so I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to scrounge for ingredients, prepare my own food, and also to pack smartly. So I would take my duffel with a little bit of clothing, some laundry detergent, and then those boxed Meal Mart Amazing Meals. And I would, for one of my deployments, I think I took something like 30 of them. And I would eat one a day or one every other day and supplement with crackers, cereal. Believe it or not, at a military dining facility, Air Force dining facility in particular, they have Baskin and Robbins ice cream. So you can have ice cream. You can get hard-boiled eggs, cereal, as I said, fruits and vegetables, the basics. It's very doable. And then you can scrounge your ingredients, and in your hooch, you can figure out a way to cook some stuff. Shabbat was much harder. So for Shabbat, we often had to fly combat missions on Shabbat. And I spoke to a couple of chaplains who advised me on how to do it. And they said, look, this is considered pikuach nefesh. You have to do it, and you're ordered to do it. It's a lawful order. You must execute. And so we had to. For Yom Tov, we often had to make whatever arrangements we could when we were overseas. So a couple of these photos here was on one of my tours. We built a sukkah out of cargo pallets and 2x4s and leaned it up against a building that made 2 walls. And then I just put up a sheet of plywood as part of a 3rd wall and some 1x2s on top. Kosher sukkah. And it was fantastic. Now, also, you can't tell from the photo, but it was about 120 degrees outside. So we ate our meals fast. Inside down there, you see there's a huge, we got a 6-foot tall Chanukiah sent to us from some organization. And then, of course, weekly Shabbat meals. It was fantastic. And there are 2 organizations that really supported us. The first was the Aleph Institute, which I hope many of you have heard of. And they're out of South Florida, run by Chabad. And they give tremendous support to military personnel and other Jews who are isolated from the communities otherwise. And the second one is Kosher Troops, which is run by 2 ladies, not too far from here. They're up in Muncie. And it started out as just making care packages for troops as one of their daughters' bat mitzvah chesed projects. And it took a life of its own. And for over a decade now, they have sent vacuum-packed chalot, salamis, anything you want. You can email them and say, hey, I'm at this location. This is my deployed address. I need X, Y, and Z to make Chag, to make Rosh Hashanah. They sent us honey cake. They sent for Sukkot decorations, all kinds of stuff. They're amazing, and they don't ask a dime. So if you're looking for an organization to give tzedakah, Kosher Troops, the Aleph Institute, and they do God's work out there for deployed military personnel. They really, really do. I'm going to tell you a couple of really funny Jewish stories about being in the military, one of which happened last week. So I'm going to start when I was in pilot training. And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner there, that's the T6, one of our training planes. After a particularly rough sortie, I knew I had failed. I did the maneuvers incorrectly. My head wasn't in it. I was tired. Sometimes you have a bad day. And the crew chief, the mechanic, right, when I got off the plane, he saw me. He said, hey, how'd your flight go today, LT? And I said, oh, man, I think I hooked it. It was bad. I failed. I did something bad. And he said, no, I don't believe that. You've got your thinking cap on. I fly with a kippah, so it became sort of an in joke that as long as he wears his thinking cap, he'll be okay. Another funny story, or not funny story, but a good story was my first flight in pilot training was supposed to be on Yom Kippur. And I said to my flight commander, I really can't fly on Yom Kippur, especially my first flight. I can't do it. It's the holiest day of the year. And they said, well, orders are orders, you have to do it. And so I reached out to a chaplain who was really sharp. I mean, this guy was the best. And 2 days later, I got a letter from the colonel on base that said, Lieutenant Goldstein is granted a religious exemption and accommodation to miss his first flight on Yom Kippur, which is pretty amazing. I still have that letter, and that colonel is now a 4-star general today, and I love the guy. He was great. I got to actually fly with him, and what an amazing pilot and really good leader, but also this chaplain knew his stuff. And I believe Captain Deutsch talked about the value of chaplains, and you can't understate that. They're amazing people. One more quick story. We used to live in Seattle, and during that time, I flew a lot to Afghanistan. That was my main theater of operations. I flew a handful of missions to Iraq, but mostly Afghanistan. We landed in Kandahar, and that's this picture up on the left. Kandahar, Afghanistan, where the C-17 is there with the light in the background. And from across the tarmac, I hear my name being called, Yoni, Yoni. I turn around and there's an Army Chinook, a huge transport helicopter. And out comes running this little soldier with just tons of equipment and a heavy machine gun on his back, and gives me a bear hug. And it's my neighbor from around the corner from Seattle. We went to the same shul, the same synagogue. Our kids were friends. And of all places, we meet in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And he was there for his 9-month deployment. And so we talked for a while. I gave him some goodies because I was going back and forth. So I had a handful of kosher snacks. So I gave him whatever he could stuff in his pockets and sent him on his way. It was really nice. And that happened a few other times in Afghanistan. You never know where you're going to meet people. And so that's it. And then one final story yesterday, or last week, I'm sorry. I was walking around the corner in the Pentagon from my office, and this guy just sees me from 20 yards away and gives me kind of a stink eye and points at me and says, you know what? Every time I see you down the hall, I think that guy has the worst looking toupee I have ever seen in my life. And I said, you know, it's funny. I'm not even Jewish. I just wear this to cover up my bald patch. And he roared with laughter at that. And he said, no, he said, it's all right. I'm just, every time I see you, I think that guy's got a terrible toupee. I say, you know what? I'll tell my wig guy to do a better job next time. So we kid each other a lot and we make light of things. So as long as you stay positive, you know, you can succeed in almost anything. And all of these gentlemen here who have served can tell you that, and that the attitude determines altitude. That's one of my favorite sayings. So just to wrap it up, just like any sort of sharp instrument, faith is like that. Emunah, right? Bitachon, trusting in God. If it weren't for Judaism, I don't know where I'd be today, honestly. And if it weren't for my family, I wouldn't know where I'd be today either. But sometimes we need a challenge. We need a push. And in the military, we get a lot of those, a lot of challenges. But as long as we remember who we are, where we came from, it helps us grow. And Captain Weinberg in the very beginning mentioned that. Through his service, he grew as a person and as a Jew. At least that's what I gained from it. And that resonates with a lot of us. Just like any blade, when you keep it to the grindstone, it gets sharper. You hone it. Faith is the same way. And so those are my thoughts, a few funny stories. And I thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Thank you very much, Major Goldstein. It's a pleasure to have you here on the panel today. All right, I know Mincha Marav is coming up pretty shortly, so I am going to briefly tell you a little bit about my background and make sure that we all get out in time to attend services. So I'm going to, first off, we will, for those of you who don't know, my wife was also in the military. I joined when I was 17 years old. I was a high school dropout and never went to my senior year of high school, joined the Air Force, and I was going to get an education. That was my major impetus, was the education. We got married, my wife and I, after I had joined the Air Force, and she decided that she also wanted an education and she wanted an avocation, a career, and so she joined the military, and we both served together in Williams Air Force Base in Arizona. I was culturally Jewish, but not very religious, didn't know much about the religion, but it was a small base and I was the Jewish lay leader. And so it was my job to coordinate all the religious functions. And so I got more involved in my religion through the military, which is quite remarkable. I think my claim to fame is probably the Pentagon, but before the Pentagon, I want to tell you this story. This is my class at the Senior Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. And I just want to tell you a little story here about how I entered the academy. You can see these are all my classmates. And at the start of the class, which was a 2-month course, they asked if there was anybody who wanted to give the invocation. And I said that I would like to give the invocation at the graduation ceremony because I knew that my invocation would be all-inclusive and would not be Christian-oriented, which is a problem sometimes when you go to functions where they have an invocation. And so they put the request on out, and I was selected to do it, which I didn't really think about it because at the time, this was in 1992, the wear of the yarmulke in the service was not allowed. In fact, it was illegal to wear a kippah in the military if the commander told you not to wear it. And so that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the military standard that the military gets to determine the dress and appearance, not the individual, and therefore you had no right to wear religious garments. Took an act of Congress, and it took 2 attempts by Congress to finally pass a law saying that the kippah was allowed and that they could make requirements to how big and how you would wear that and so on. But at this point in time, this is 1992, the yarmulke was not allowed. And I thought about it and I said, well, I'm going to go to this invocation. I'm going to provide the invocation at a graduation ceremony. I have to wear a yarmulke. So I thought what I would do is I would put the yarmulke in my pocket. I would go to the head table, tell everybody to bow their heads, and then I would say the prayer. And I knew I was going to say something to the effect that, blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has brought us to this occasion, and blah, blah, blah. But it would be a very heartfelt Jewish prayer, and I would have my yarmulke on, and no one would be the wiser. But I didn't realize that with this many students, you had at least 5 guests for every student at the graduation. So we're talking about almost 2,000 students. It was in a war memorial, and I wasn't coming up to the head table. I was coming up to a table that was in front of the head table, and they announced from Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, Master Sergeant Scott Schlesinger will provide the invocation, and a spotlight followed me from my table to this table, to the lectern to give the invocation. Behind me was the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force and several 4-star generals, because this is a very significant event. I put on my yarmulke, I said the invocation, and when I was walking back, I know that I was getting, in the terms of Major Goldstein, stink eye from quite a few people at the head table. But it was okay because I won the #1 graduate award for that class. And the top graduate is called the John Levitto Award. And the John Levitto Award is pretty significant because John Levitto was a sergeant in the United States Air Force during Vietnam who received the Medal of Honor. He was the first enlisted person from the Air Force to receive such an honor. And he did this on that plane that you see right there, which was flying over a battlefield, and they were dropping flares out of the plane at night to illuminate the battlefield. And the plane was struck by anti-aircraft fire. The plane went into a dive. The flares that they were throwing out, one of them enlighted inside the plane. John Levitto picked up the flare, threw it out of the plane just as it exploded, saving the entire crew and the plane. And here's the replica of the plane at the school. It's significant to note that John Levitto was Jewish, and he's noted over in the Jewish War Veteran Museum in DC. I took this photo back home with me, and I showed it to my Chabad rabbis in Myrtle Beach, and they noticed something very significant about this plane. Right there on the nose, it says 770. Okay, I don't know if that means anything to you, but it certainly meant a lot to the rabbis there at Myrtle Beach. Actually, the most significant part of my career was being stationed at the Pentagon. I was very fortunate to get an assignment there working on the Joint Staff. I had the distinct honor of working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I worked in his public affairs office. When I retired from the military, I I got an opportunity to get up and say a few words there in the press room, in the briefing room there at the Pentagon. And then when I retired, the then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General John Shalikashvili, did the awards ceremony. There's my wife, my daughter, Sarah, who is now a teacher over at the Hebrew Academy. But I thought that this was significant because this was also the first time that Rabbi Emunah had ever been to the Pentagon. He came for my retirement ceremony as well, and he got a tour of the Pentagon. He also mentioned that this was the first time he ever took Metro, and that was also a significant thing for him as well. So that's my story. I did very well in the military, graduating from college. I got an MBA before I walked out, so this is a high school dropout with a success story. And I can't tell you for certain whether it was because I became more religious or in spite of becoming more religious. I tend to think it was because I became more religious that I was this successful. And so that is my story, and I'm sticking to it. And at this point, I want to make sure that everybody can get out. We still have another 30 minutes before, and I'm trying to figure out how to stop the share and bring back Mr. Rudman and add him to the spotlight and ask him to see if I ask him to unmute. And I will turn the program back over to Max. Thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to share our stories and to be part of this panel. And I thank all of you for taking time to be with us this evening. And again, we still have another 30 minutes to make it to Mincha Marav. Max, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, very different presentations. We promised a few questions to be, if possible, if we can get some quick answers, that would be great. Was corrected, only 18 Jews, a significant number nevertheless, and a Jewish number also have earned the Medal of Honor. Captain Weinberg, how many Jews were on the ship? What was their affiliations? A quick answer would be great if you can give us that. Can you get my Captain Weinberg? Are you able to unmute Captain Weinberg?
First.
Okay. Scott?
Sure, I'm trying to find him on here to allow him to unmute.
Probably at the top of the list because he was among the first to join.
Not the way it's working, yeah. Is he still on? I don't see him still on.
I don't know.
I think he dropped.
He sent you a chat. He says you need to unmute him.
So I'm trying to find him on here so that I can do just that, but I don't see him on here. Not showing up.
Okay. I'm going to just suggest it. I'm sorry. Okay. Captain Weinberg, do you have an answer to that question? How many?
Yes, Max. What was your question?
The question is, how many Jews were on the ship and what were their affiliations? That was one of the questions we had.
Sure. Out of 5,600 service people, there were around 30 Jews. Most of them were what I call is hidden in the woodwork Jews. You know, not closet Jews. I don't want to say that. They were hidden in the woodwork. But what enabling when we did services, when I did services along with my friend Louis Myers and actually a couple pilots who came out of the woodwork and including the baker who made challah for us in the evenings, we found out about 25 Jews aboard that ship that we were able to find out. There were a number of individuals who were seeking knowledge about Judaism and who were interested, but basically about 25 to 30. A lot more stories on that, but that's what I'll pass on for now. Thank you.
Major Goldstein, are you using your language training in Hungarian at your present position in the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
No, but I speak other languages too, so I use those. I'm currently learning Arabic because my region where I'm currently working is very heavily Arabic speaking. So Hungarian itself is kind of taking a back seat, but luckily I do have an opportunity to use it when we have different country service members come through. When the Hungarian attachés come to the Pentagon, we always chat for a few minutes.
Thank you very much. I just want to point out that in addition to his service in the military, Dr. Deutsch also has a distinguished service in Veterans, Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as serving in Virginia in a medical school department. So he's served many capacities in addition to his military service. So we're very lucky to have some very, very talented people joining us, sharing different perspectives on their experience, and reminding us on Memorial Day the importance of not taking anything for granted and being grateful for what we have, and grateful to those who have served. So thank you very much. Wishing you a great day and a great week and a great Chag Shavuos coming up for all of us. Thank you very much. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you very much again to everybody, and have a pleasant evening. And Mincha Marav starts in just 25 minutes. See you in shul.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Shalom.